I'm Patrick Lilia. Today, rain and storms with a high of 84. Then tonight, more rain possible with a low of 64. Nightingale is your cozy, comfortable neighborhood bar and restaurant at 26th and Lyndale in Minneapolis. Come in for the famous Nightingale burger or the ginger tamari chicken wings. View their menu or place a takeout order at nightingalempls.com.
Portions of the following program may be pre-recorded.
You are listening to a special episode of The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. Given the tragedy in Minnesota with the assassination of the Minnesota House Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the shootings of Minnesota State Senator Hoffman and his wife, we are foregoing our regular broadcast. Later in the show, Kat Rohn, the executive director of OutFront Minnesota, will join us to share their reflections on the legacy of Speaker Emerita Hortman. We don't only want to focus on the suspect. We will be joined as well tomorrow by Minnesota Representative Sandra Feist. The DFL caucus, we had hoped to have Representative Feist here today, but the DFL caucus is in session this afternoon to be in community and to process. And they're going to be obviously talking about how to move forward as a party and as a state. So we will have her tomorrow. There are, up first, a lot of updates about the case. A lot of things happening very quickly, and I want to try to lay those out here for you because there's so much going on, and I know that because there are so many things happening, there's a lot of misinformation going around the internet particularly, and that misinformation is not just because so many things are changing quickly, but also because there are far-right MAGA people who are deliberately putting out misinformation. Earlier today at a press conference, the acting U.S. attorney for Minnesota, Joe Thompson, said that officials don't use the term assassination often, but that is how to describe what has happened here in Minnesota. He said, quote, "It's no exaggeration to say this is the stuff of nightmares. In Minnesota, we have experienced one of the worst acts of political violence in the state's history. And over the weekend, there was a huge coalition of county, state, and federal agencies conducting what has been the largest manhunt in the state's history as well. There are now federal charges against the suspect, Vance Boelter. Earlier this morning, Boelter was taken into federal custody by the U.S. Marshals. His initial appearance at a courthouse was earlier this afternoon at 1:30. Before we get to the federal charges, I want to note that Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty said in a press conference this morning that she will pursue first-degree murder charges against Boelter. She has assigned her most senior prosecutors to the case. In Minnesota, for folks who don't know, either if you live in Minnesota or if you're listening in Chicago on WCPT 820, a prosecutor needs a grand jury indictment to level first-degree murder charges against a suspect. So that is why over the weekend, when we had second-degree murder charges, those were officially filed to get the nationwide warrant for Boelter's arrest. Now that he is in custody in Minnesota, they will move forward to bring evidence to a grand jury to get that indictment to pursue first-degree murder charges. At 11 a.m. today, on Monday, the acting U.S. attorney for Minnesota, Joe Thompson, who I mentioned earlier, announced that the federal authorities have filed 6 federal charges against Boelter. Important to note that these do not nullify the state charges. Those will continue. The federal charges will move forward first, however. There are 6 counts. Count number 1, stalking of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman, use of interstate facilities to do so. Count number 2, stalking of John Hoffman, State Senator John Hoffman, use of interstate facilities to do so. Count 3, murder of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman through the use of a firearm. Count 4, murder of Mark Hortman, Melissa's husband, through the use of a firearm. Count 5, shooting of Melissa and Mark Hortman, a firearms offense. And count 6, shooting of John and Yvette Hoffman, Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, on a firearms offense. When asked at the press conference earlier today about whether or not federal officials will seek the death penalty, Thompson said, quote, "It's too early to tell." In Minnesota, we do not have the death penalty here. So if when charged and if convicted this on state charges, that would be maximum life imprisonment. Too early to tell, according to the acting U.S. attorney, of whether or not they will pursue the death penalty. I want to walk through now the timeline of events because a lot of new details came out earlier today in the multiple press conferences, particularly the one with federal officials. What we have now learned is that Boelter allegedly went to 4 houses Friday night into Saturday morning. His first target was the home of State Senator Hoffman. He was allegedly wearing that hyper-realistic silicone mask that we've seen in the photo that the officers, investigators have released over the weekend. He pounded on the senator's door. When Senator Hoffman answered, Boelter allegedly shone his flashlight into the senator's eyes. He claimed that he was responding to a shooting in the house and then lowered his light, at which point Hoffman realized that Boelter was not a police officer. Boelter then allegedly shouted, "This is a robbery," and the senator was trying to push Boelter out when Boelter allegedly opened fire. He shot the senator and his wife multiple times, 17 in all. Senator Hoffman 9 times, his wife 8 times. You can see in press footage over the weekend, that there are multiple bullet holes in the Hoffman's front door. After that, Boelter allegedly drove to Maple Grove. For folks who don't know, in Chicago or in greater Minnesota, Senator Hoffman's residence is in Champlin. To get to Maple Grove, that is a 16-minute drive approximately south of Champlin. Champlin is in the northwest metro region. So Boelter allegedly drove 16 minutes south to Maple Grove to the house of a Minnesota House member, but the representative and his family were on vacation, so no one answered the door. Boelter then allegedly drove to New Hope, Minnesota. New Hope is south of Maple Grove. That's approximately a 10-minute drive. He went to the home, as it turns out, of Senator Ann Rest, DFLer from New Hope. For folks in Illinois, DFL is a Democratic Farmer Labor Party, the Democratic Party here. That's the DFL here in Minnesota. Senator Rest has confirmed to press and officers that it was her home. However, while Boelter was outside, parked on the street, a New Hope police officer saw Boelter's SUV, which was a former police vehicle. He had emergency lights on it. The New Hope police officer, she pulled over to him, rolled down her window to talk to him to see, if he was there for that wellness check on Senator Rest's home. The officer says that Boelter did not respond, just sat there and stared straight ahead. So not getting anything out of him, the officer then went to Senator Rest's home, waiting for other officers to arrive. At this point, Boelter took off and headed to Brooklyn Park. Brooklyn Park is 15 minutes north of New Hope. And I want to note here, because how did Brooklyn PD intercept him? So at this point, while he is driving to Senator Rest's home, while he is, moving towards Brooklyn Park, Sergeant Riley Norden had finished his shift. Sergeant with Brooklyn Park Police Department, heard what was happening in Champlin and that one of the victims was a state senator. So Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley, this is a quotation from him, said that Sergeant Norden, his shift was over. He's taken off his gear. I'm quoting here from Chief Bruley. And as he's walking out, he looks at a couple of officers and says, "Hey, just to be safe, why don't you go up and just check on the Hortman's house?" So those 2 officers did that. They did that. Now, Boelter is driving to Minnesota Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman's home in Brooklyn Park. He is parked in the driveway. He's got his emergency lights flashing. He allegedly has the silicone mask on. But before he got to the door, the two officers from Brooklyn Park PD, they arrived. He saw them and allegedly opened fire on them. He then shot his way into the Hortman's home, where he killed Speaker Emerita Hortman and her husband, also fatally shooting their dog. He then escaped out the back. And officials believe, and they said this now multiple times in multiple press conferences, that if the Brooklyn Park PD had not intercepted him and deprived him of his car, they believe that Boelter would have allegedly continued to go on the homes on his list. They announced today, this was new information at the press conference with Acting U.S. Attorney Thompson. He had multiple lists. Actually, they found notebooks of Boelter's where he had lists of names, but apparently he had also been stalking the homes of the targets on his list for a while, because in the margins he had surveillance notes in those notebooks. They don't know the total number. Drew Evans, who is the superintendent for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, he said that there are multiple notebooks with multiple duplicate names, but they are still sifting through all of that, so they don't have a final total of how many folks were on there. As we understand it, they were DFLers, Democrats, that were on this, and that a theme of the folks on the list were folks that were pro-choice, that they had advocated, and in the legislature or in policies for abortion rights for people in Minnesota and in America, as an overlapping theme. As information about, so that's the timeline there. My executive producer Jim Pounds is here in the studio with me. I mean, it's very harrowing, Jim, right?
Well, I have a lot of different thoughts, and I'm sure I will over the months ahead. But what sort of astonishes me, and I always try to put myself in the mind of someone else when I'm trying to figure out what they must be thinking. And I think after that first experience of shooting somebody 17 times, and what a horrific thing that must be, if you're even crazy enough to do that, it feels like that would be a kind of a point where you go, well, I got to go home. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just amazing how crazy you'd have to be to go past that first scene. That's what I can't get over.
It demonstrates, and I have to be inclined to believe investigators right now when they say, if the Brooklyn PD had not intercepted him and gone there, thanks to the proactive efforts of Sergeant Riley Norton with the Brooklyn Police Department, that he would have continued on.
Yep.
We have to fit in a break here. We are going to continue on with this, the latest updates in this case, and we will also, at the bottom of the hour, have Kat Rohn, Executive Director from OutFront Minnesota, to share their remembrances of Melissa Hortman. More after this break.
Hi, I'm Peter Solak.
And I'm Adam Ostrowski.
We are here at Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces to talk about outdoor fires. Sitting around a fire is the oldest, most basic form of human activity.
What's new is in the way fire is burned. We can show you how to burn cleaner with a lot less smoke.
The radiant heat and light from an open fire is unmatched. It kindles our spirits and connects us to the outdoors. And now it's easier to experience and enjoy.
Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces sells and installs wood and gas burning fire pits and fireplaces. Let us help you experience an outdoor fire without all the smoke.
Come see the many ways you can enjoy a fire outdoors.
Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces has over 35 working wood and gas units on display at the corner of East Franklin and Riverside Avenue in Minneapolis. More information at woodlandstoves.com. Find the fire that works for you. Woodland Stoves and Fireplaces. Out of the ordinary products and services since 1977.
Your heart beats for generations. Take care of it.
There's a lot that we can do to take care of ourselves. And so I think it's important to take the smaller steps and break it down into more manageable pieces, because the little steps leads to big changes.
Every beat of your heart tells a story of love, resilience, and hope. For Indigenous women, taking care of your heart means creating more moments with the ones you cherish. Let's protect that story. Learn more at hennepin.us/heart-beats.
Hey, it's Patrick for Zero Res. June is here, which means you might be having a graduation party at your house soon. Summer also means sleepovers. Your kids are going to be at the playground, at the water park, at the beach. There's going to be a lot of mess coming into the house over the summer, and you need to call my cleaning heroes at Zero Res to make sure your home is in order for the summer. And since June is here, it's time to take advantage of Zero Res's best deal of the summer. Zero Res can take care of any surface in your home or business, including carpet, tile, hardwood, rugs, upholstery, and air ducts. This month, take 20% off all services when you call my friends at Zero Res 9520 Res or go to ZeroResMinnesota.com. Just tell them you want the AM 950 special. Their prompt, courteous team will come out and take care of you. Again, that's 20% off all services this month. Go to ZeroResMinnesota.com or call 9520 Res and ask for the AM 950 special. Zero Res, backward or forward, spells the same.
Hey, it's Freddie Bell, host of New Beginnings, designed for those of us more seasoned, I'll say, with informative talk on everything from health, finance, local and regional news, volunteerism, spirituality, and even a bit of humor tossed in. So if you're proud to be a more seasoned listener, tune in to New Beginnings Sunday afternoons at 1 right here on the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, AM 950.
Welcome back to a special broadcast of the Gailey Show. I am your host, John Parker. Given the tragedy in Minnesota over the past weekend, the assassination of former Speaker of the Minnesota State House, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, and the shootings of State Senator Hoffman and his wife, we are foregoing our regular broadcast in favor of this special broadcast to go through the facts of the case to help dispel misinformation that is happening, particularly on social media. I want to, before the break, Jim, we were talking about how methodical this all was, how the acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson outlined how Boelter allegedly had been stalking the folks on his list, had been making, surveilling them, learning things about their patterns of movement and making notes about that in multiple notebooks in his car. That if the Brooklyn Park PD had not been proactive and gone there to Melissa Hortman's house, that he most likely would have continued on, and that there would have been more bloodshed throughout the morning. Haven't received. I know there are folks that are on the right, and I want to say there is no combating the disinformation and misinformation from MAGA. We can put out the facts here, but they are very clearly committed to lying about things. I think one of the things that they're trying to lie about is the No Kings flyers that were in the back of Boelter's vehicle. We don't know right now what those were for. I haven't really seen anything in the press conferences that can speak to those as well. I think the investigators are still trying to find those. I also want to clear up for folks, if you're not MAGA, then you want to hear actual facts. Boelter was appointed to a workforce development board, but there are hundreds every year of volunteer positions. Anybody, Jim, you can apply to one. I can apply to one. I've been on boards at the county level here in Minnesota. And, what the board that I was on was a food and nutrition commission in Ramsey County. When I applied to be on it, it was an application through the county website. I didn't even go into the commission to a meeting. They just, they had to sign off on it, right. But they just looked at the application and they had a vote, right. And they moved on. They didn't know me. They didn't know anything about me. You know what I mean? So there is a very formal process that you go through, but that doesn't mean that Governor Walz had a relationship with him. I think what's interesting though, when you look at those boards, Senator Hoffman and Speaker Emerita Hortman were on these boards. And so I know that Drew Evans yesterday in one of the press conferences, Drew Evans, again, being the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's superintendent, said that they didn't know the overlap and the relationship that Boelter had to both of them through that particular work. Clearly, being someone who, was the theme on there was abortion rights, and when he was clearly against it. There's video of him in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he is preaching there at a service, railing about how churches don't know about abortion, and that it's illegal, and yada yada yada. There was also sermons that he was giving that were anti-LGBTQ.
Very much so.
Community.
This guy was a gay hater, no
so
question.
There was, I think the right is very clearly engaging and just horrific. It's absolutely horrific and unconscionable what they're doing. But this is
what we've
come to expect from them.
This is an opportunity to say, hey, this was wrong, and we renounce it. I said Lisa DeMuth should do that, right after it happened. Where is the moral leadership from the moral?
Well, that leads into something. I have a package that I'd like to play here from the Minnesota News Connection in our Patrick, in our control room producer. If you have that handy, if we can play that, which is talking about political violence here in the state of Minnesota.
Minnesota and the nation are feeling the emotional weight of political violence after this weekend's assassination of a top Democratic state lawmaker and the attack of a fellow legislator. State Representative Melissa Hortman, who had served as Minnesota House Speaker, was killed inside her home along with her husband. In a nearby suburb, Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were also shot and wounded. Police call the shootings politically motivated. The incidents follow a trend of political violence, including this spring's arson attack at the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. David Schultz, a political scientist at Hamline University, says the current mood somewhat mirrors the violence toward prominent leaders seen in the 1960s.
Once violence starts to occur, people get used to violence or it becomes part of the game. And that seems to be where we're degenerating now.
These events also follow last year's assassination attempt on President Donald Trump on the campaign trail, along with increased threats against poll workers. Schultz says in a healthy democracy, ballots, elections, and other engagement tools resolve differences, not violence. He worries the attacks will discourage elected officials from talking with constituents and curtail open meetings. Schultz says society has grown used to a more isolated way of life, pointing to shopping habits and some people choosing to live in areas cut off from those with different views. He says making matters worse, political messages spread through social media fuel misinformation and radicalization.
Falsity travels more rapidly and more deeply than truth, and the relative anonymity or distance of the social media also emboldens people to radicalize. Put all that together, that gets us part of the recipe of where we are in our society right now.
Schultz says he's not too optimistic that heightened tensions and political violence will end anytime soon. He says there are some encouraging signs younger voters won't embrace identity politics and demonize their political opponents. But Schultz believes those patterns have shifted, delaying a return to a moderate political tone. This is Mike Moen for Minnesota News Connection. Find our trust indicators at publicnewsservice.org.
We thank the Minnesota News Connection for providing that reporting. There was something to that very striking yesterday, a story that Governor Walz shared in the press conference announcing that Boelter had been apprehended. He was sharing a story about Speaker Emerita Hortman, about how when he came into office they were beginning that session that was, one of they call the Minnesota Miracle, that Speaker Emerita Hortman said there will be conflict, but made everybody read a Getting to Yes, which is a book, and said that yes, there's going to be conflicts and difference of opinions, but through this framework of being able to treat people across the aisle and within the conference as being humans and not denigrating them and not labeling them to be the enemy, said that Governor Walz was really crediting her for that approach of how do we have disagreements on policy and politics while still finding a way to move legislation forward. And it was heartbreaking when Governor Walz pointed out that the room that they were having the press conference in last night, the Special Operations Center, was there because of funding that Speaker Emerita Hortman had shepherded through the Minnesota legislature. We are going to take a break here. We're going to have more on this story as it is developing. You are listening to a special broadcast of The Gailey Show.
Hello, Minnesota. This is Tom Hartman, and you can catch me every weekday from 11 to 2 right here on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. It's smart radio for smart people.
Your Twin Cities Metro Public Libraries are committed to providing quality services, resources, and programs to the LGBTQ+ community. Check out the Metro Pride book list, including ebooks and e-audio for kids, teens, and adults at melsa.org/pride-book. Hey, can you hear me? Perfect. Hello, I'm John. It's nice to meet you. Can I confirm the Kat Rohn?
Yes, Kat Rohn.
And I want to also confirm you use they, she pronouns. Perfect. Okay. In a second here, you'll hear the feed of what's actually on the air right now. We are live, hot mic on the YouTube. Hi, folks on YouTube. If you see Kat on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a chat, a private chat. I will put the time cues of how far we are to the segment. Do you have any questions for me?
Nope.
Okay,
Good to go.
We'll start here in about a minute and a half. Thank you so much for taking the time.
For sure.
Hospice, we understand that choosing the right hospice care provider can be overwhelming, but we're here to assist you. Learn more today at marytinc.com.
This June, Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus serves Diva Worship for their Leading Ladies Divas of Broadway Pride concert. Feel the heat, the passion, the undeniable power of music that sets your soul on fire. From the sultry seduction of Bring on the Men, to the soul-stirring wisdom of Children Will Listen, to the joyous, rebellious charm of Do Re Mi. With dazzling harmonies, show-stopping flair, and a touch or more of jazz hands, the Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus will take you on a thrilling, emotional, and downright life-changing musical journey. It's the electric energy of 180 voices, bold, unapologetic, and dripping with Broadway brilliance. This isn't just a concert, it's a celebration of pride, power, and the irresistible magic of Broadway. The dates are June 21st and 22nd at the Ordway. Tickets start at $28. Get yours today at tcgmc.org. That's tcgmc.org. It's entertainment worth coming out for.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Today, rain and storms with a high of 84. Then tonight, more rain possible with a low of 64. Nightingale is your cozy, comfortable neighborhood bar and restaurant at 26th and Lindale in Minneapolis. Come in for the famous Nightingale burger or the ginger tamari chicken wings. View their menu or place a takeout order at nightingalempls.com.
AM 950 KTN up St. Louis Park, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
You are listening to a special broadcast of The Gailey Show, given the tragic events that transpired over the weekend, the political assassination of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the shootings of State Senator Hoffman and his wife. We are foregoing our regular broadcast today. We are very grateful to be joined by Kat Rohn, who is the Executive Director of OutFront Minnesota. For folks in Chicago, OutFront Minnesota is the state's LGBTQ advocacy and organizing organization here in Minnesota. Kat is the Executive Director. Amazing work that they do for the LGBT community and Minnesota, really, and has done a lot of work on the Hill, within the legislature here in Minnesota. So, Kat, we're very grateful for your time today to join us.
Yeah, glad to be here, despite all of the really, tragic news.
Very much so. And the reason why I'm glad to have you here today is that, yes, there are the developments in the case, and we need to be covering that and, what happened and how the suspect went about this horrific act. But I also want to hold up Speaker Emerita Hortman, and I know that you have done work, in the legislature. So would you mind, sharing with us some of your reflections on the speaker and the work that she did for the state?
Yeah, I mean, I think, all of us are holding the families of Melissa and Mark Hortman, and of course, Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette and their families in our thoughts. It's really shocking news to wake up to any violence in our state, but especially to see such directed and targeted violence at, leaders who have stepped up and served their communities, regardless of your political beliefs or alignments or values. These are folks who were elected by their constituents and chose to serve communities selflessly and to try and better our state in so many ways. And so, I think we're all holding that. Certainly Melissa Hortman, throughout her long tenure in the Minnesota legislature, has done some really tremendous work for LGBTQ communities. Running back, she was one of the co-sponsors on Minnesota's marriage legislation as it moved through the Minnesota House in 2013, has been instrumental in the work around banning conversion therapy in the state, and was really, at the helm of some of the most dramatic advancements for LGBTQ rights in our state over the 23-24 biennium, and worked hand in hand with our organization, with community members, and with members of our state's queer caucus who really brought forward that work. But without a leader dedicated to really serving and engaging with communities, I don't think that would have happened. And I think one of the real strengths of Melissa Hortman as a person, but especially as a legislative leader, was really genuinely engaging with the many constituents that call Minnesota a place. And I've seen that reflected from folks from all sorts of different political ends of the spectrum and all sorts of different perspectives, but her willingness to sit down and engage with communities and really take in, what are your needs? How can we advance this? What is the policy that we can work on? How do we incorporate this into the big picture? Is something that is really unique. And I think a quality that will be dearly missed.
Very much so. Not to bring it back to the suspect, but we know that he was in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, giving speeches that were anti-LGBTQ against the community. And here you're describing a representative and a speaker who was such an ally to the community and right there with us for years now. Can you talk more about the moment that we are in, where we see folks like Speaker Emerita Hortman and the work that she was doing for the community, and then it seems almost perpetually being up against this either rhetoric, this violent rhetoric, and in this instance, assassination, a taking of her life. Can you speak to this moment that we're living in, where it's just so polarized right now, and tragically so?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I would really ground this in is that, unfortunately, particularly around movements like LGBTQ rights equality movements, but also around reproductive rights issues, of which Melissa Hortman was also a champion and leader on advancing here within our state. The specter of violence and extremist violence rooted in really harmful belief systems is not new for us. I think, one of the things that, for so many of the folks who were targeted on this list, including Planned Parenthood clinics and folks who work there, that through line to the violence that we saw around, abortion care providers in the 1990s that has continued to this day, is top of mind. And I think, we don't know everything about the details about this particular incident. I'm sure we'll learn more as this investigation continues. But I think it is a disservice to the moment to try and extract this particular individual from that history. I think the history and reality that we're living in right now is that there is rhetoric and extremism that is fueling violence, whether it is through horrifying acts like this, or through just the regular threats that organizations and legislators get on a regular basis, that is amplifying the risk of harm to people who are serving their communities. And, when I talked with many legislators over the course of the day on Saturday, I was checking in with members of our queer caucus, with many of our friends and allies. This is not the first time that I've had to have calls with people about threats that they've received. This is certainly one of the most egregious and serious conversations that we've had around it. But, I think this is not new. And I think that part of it is scary. I think for some folks, this might be a sort of reawakening to the moment that we're currently in. But it's a moment that we've been in for a long time. Our organization has, over its history, received threats as well. And I think, this is a reality that we all have to contend with, and that we have to think about when we see really violent rhetoric and extremist beliefs being platformed by individuals, and especially by elected leaders.
Mm-hmm. Can you share more? Because Governor Walz was sharing some really lovely stories of Speaker Emerita Hortman's approach to conflict, of how do we deal with, disagreement? How do we deal with folks who are, maybe on the opposite ends of the, spectrum of a particular policy issue? Would you be able to speak more to Speaker Emerita Hortman's approach to leading and leadership in fraught moments?
Yeah, I think there's, two pieces that I would bring forward. One, I think she was somebody who deeply understood how to leverage a given moment and the timing of a given moment to do good work and not compromise on those values. I think back to the very tail end of 2024, in a very chaotic legislative session. But there was a press conference that she had held, and there had been a lot of debates back and forth around an inclusive Equal Rights Amendment. And she was asked by press, would you trade this Equal Rights Amendment to get a bonding bill through? And, I think for a lot of politicians who just, sort of read the middle or try and go for those issues that are like, well, this is the lowest hanging fruit, we can get this through and people will be happy with it and we'll wrap it up. That would have been an easy trade. And, she said very clearly and unequivocally, and I hope I quote her here correctly, but she said, if the condition of a bonding bill is compromising on civil rights for Minnesotans, there will be no bonding bill. And, I think the difference between somebody who just works for compromise because it's the easy path, and the person who looks for middle ground and workability is something that I think is unique about her. We hear a lot about bipartisanship and middle ground and compromise in space. But she was also somebody who drew really clear lines about her values. And I think we saw that coming into this session, where she made clear to so many constituencies that, these are hard lines that we will not sacrifice here in Minnesota. And she worked really hard to get the agreement that we came out of this session with, after many, many fraught months of challenges and special elections and negotiations. And, I think that is as much a part of her sort of ability to work with folks, is her ability to draw lines, to have clear stances, and to speak from a place of values, not just from this is what's poll testing the best right now, or this is what feels like the middle of the road. But her ability to do that and actually negotiate and sit down with folks across the aisle. When we passed through the conversion therapy ban in 2023, we were able to get 11 Republicans to join in the House of Representatives, along with every Democrat, to pass that bill. And I think that was really a testament to work that had been done over many years, not just with her, but with many legislators, to build some of those bridges and find common ground where there are shared values around protecting kids, around ensuring that we have access to real and good healthcare and mental health care in our state. And I think, those are the kinds of moments that I think she really worked for and helped support people around, was to say, reach across the aisle, hold your values, engage with people, and treat them as partners in this work, even if you have serious policy disagreements, even if you don't love a bill that got passed or didn't get passed. Keep showing up for the work.
Mm-hmm. There have been descriptions of Speaker Emerita Hortman as one of the most consequential Speaker of the House in Minnesota history. And I think maybe only Minnesotans would have known last year, as Governor Walz was on the Democratic ticket as the vice presidential nominee, that so many of the things that he was selected for would not have happened if not for Speaker Emerita Hortman shepherding those through and doing exactly what you were talking about there, of holding to values and finding ways of negotiation to get so many of those progressive policies through that legislature in a time where the DFL is not historically known for all working together, and they had a 1-vote majority in the session that's dubbed the miracle session. And I think what you're saying is a beautiful testament to her legacy here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things, both, I think those of us who did the work know that the work wasn't just one person at any point. It was a lot of people organizing over many years to get this work done. But Melissa Hortman was at the helm of the legislature, was not just working that sort of insider political game, but was also cultivating that slate of candidates who won their elections in 2022, was out door knocking for folks, was out engaging and recruiting candidates who could win elections, and turned around and made that promise to get really bold ideas passed. And I think, that through line is really important. And I think it's also really important both for Minnesotans and other folks to recognize just the tremendous loss of leadership we've had over the last year. This tragedy is certainly top of mind for all of us. But we also lost Senate Majority Leader Carrie Dietzig to cancer at the end of December last year. And so two of the key folks who were instrumental and absolutely central to all of those tremendous policy wins are gone. And I think, Minnesotans will miss that. I think there's a gap to be filled. I think there are many great folks in the legislature and in our state who can step up, but I think that will be felt. And I think, that commemoration of Melissa Hortman's tenure and her work and, the culmination of so many efforts in 23-24 is, historic, but also, something that I hope other leaders continue to aspire to and look to. What are the lessons to be learned? What is it about her leadership and her approach and the work that was done that brought us to that moment? And how can we continue to carry on that work? Because I really think, for her memory and to honor that legacy, we have to carry on that work of engaging our communities and bringing people forward in a Minnesota that holds all of us.
I couldn't put it any better. I have to fit in a break here. Kat, can you join us after the break? Because I would love to talk about what those attributes are, those leadership skills, that what she brought to the table that we would want to see and carry on and as her legacy. If you can stay with us after this break, you are listening to a special broadcast of the Gailey Show here on AM 950 KTNF and on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. More with Kat Rohn, Executive Director of OutFront Minnesota, after the break.
Hey, it's Tom. There's a war being waged on clean energy. A bill in Congress could eliminate the 30% federal tax credit for solar by the end of 2025. And once it's gone, it may never come back. Fossil fuel giants and their MAGA friends in Washington want to kill green energy. But you can fight back. Going solar with All Energy Solar isn't just smart, it's a form of resistance. You choose where your money goes, not to utility companies, not to fossil fuel billionaires, but toward clean, renewable power for your home. A system for All Energy Solar works in Minnesota year-round because it runs on sunlight, not heat. So even in the dead of winter, you're generating electricity. And All Energy Solar helps you save with every rebate and incentive available. This is the moment to act. Waiting means risking with this tax credit and giving the upper hand to MAGA Republicans. So get your free consultation today at allenergysolar.com and take back your power.
Get ready for a full weekend of celebration, connection, and community at Twin Cities Pride 2025, happening June 28th and 29th at Loring Park. This is the nation's largest free Pride festival with 3 stages of queer entertainment, over 650 vendors, 4 food courts, and 2 beer gardens. Check out the new artist gallery, the expanded youth hideaway, and the powerful History Pavilion featuring the Jean Nicholas Treader Collection. And while you're at Pride, come see us at AM 950. We're broadcasting live Saturday and Sunday from booths 407 and 408 at the Yale Place Willow Street entrance near the Beer Garden. Stop by, take a seat, and listen to your favorite LGBTQ plus shows like The Gailey Show, The Illegal Trans Woman with Ellie Krug, and The Downright Upright Show with Philip Anthony. We'll also have live broadcasts from Matt McNeil, Ghost Box Radio with Greg Bakken, Feels Out Loud, Redefining Recovery, and more of our great weekend programming. Plus, we've got AM 950 themed Pride swag. Pick up bandanas, stickers, tote bags, and meet your favorite hosts. Whether you're a longtime listener or just discovering us, we'd love to meet you at Pride June 28th and 29th.
The Council on LGBTQIA2S+ Minnesotans is conducting a community needs survey. Data from the survey will be used to make recommendations to improve LGBTQ people's health and well-being in Minnesota. The May 31st deadline has been extended through June. So as we celebrate Pride Month, make sure you take advantage of this extraordinary opportunity to tell our stories. The survey is confidential, and you can fill it out online at mnqt.info/survey.
Chanhassen Dinner Theaters brings you its most popular show of all time, Grease. You'll hear all your favorite hits from the Broadway musical and the movie. Join the whole gang at Rydell High. We'll sing, we'll dance, we'll bring you back to high school life in the 50s. Poodle skirts, bobby socks, the soda shop, and drive-in movies. Grease! It'll rock your socks off. Order your tickets today. Visit chanhassendt.com.
You are listening to a special broadcast of the Gailey Show. I am your host, Tom Parker. Given the events of the past week, we're going our regular broadcast to talk about the legacy of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and how we can honor that and keep that going into the future. We are joined by Kat Rohn, Executive Director of OutFront Minnesota. Kat, before the break, you were talking about those very special leadership skills that Melissa, Speaker Emerita Hortman, brought to her role, not only as Speaker of the House, but also as a representative and also someone who got out, recruited candidates, knocked on doors. Can you talk a little bit more about those skills that you would love to see folks take up and carry on in her memory?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of qualities that make for a good leader. I think part of it is knowing yourself and, tenacity, particularly in, fraught, and tight legislative environments like Minnesota has had over many years, where we've had divided legislative control, where we've had, challenging budget negotiations, where we've worked through, big challenges, whether it was, the COVID pandemic or any number of instances that have come up, including, the killing of George Floyd and others. These are moments that test leaders, and they test leaders both to hold to their values, but also in how they engage with communities. And I think, two of the qualities that I saw in, Melissa Hortman's work was that willingness to engage and sit down with basically just about anybody from any position and really listen to them and talk to them, regardless of whether or not anybody was going to come out of the meeting with a different view on a piece of policy. There was a willingness to really engage, and not just at a surface level, not just sort of the, thanks so much for your email reply that we see from so many politicians, but to actually sit down and engage with folks thoughtfully about this and then bring it back and consider it. But also to really think about how you cultivate that table of people around you, both the legislators, but also the groups and organizations and advisors that you have that really, help to support this work. Nobody in a legislature, nobody in a leadership position does this alone. And I think, Melissa Hortman was somebody who really drew on the strength of those around her and cultivated and grew those around her by challenging them to do the work, to be better, to be a part of this big picture, to run for office, to step up. And I think, those are qualities that, are really admirable. I think they, really contributed to her success and the way in which she's admired by so many of her colleagues, both current and former colleagues who have served with her.
Mm-hmm. I think it's something, as you say that there are folks who have under the new administration, Democrats, centrist folk, maybe some center-right Democrats who've tried to pull away from supporting the community, and that was something that Speaker Emerita Hortman did not do. Was not pulling away, was holding to those values. What is something that you would say right now to Minnesota about how should we be coming together in this moment, and not only honoring her legacy, but how do we move forward now as a state?
Her legislative director, Chris McCall, who does a lot of the coordinating work, folks who don't know legislative work, legislative assistants, legislative coordinators, and directors do so much work behind the scenes to help make all of our institutions run. And deep appreciation to these folks, and much love to all of them, because I know that they are right in the midst of all of this as they support their elected officials. But one of the things that he said, in sort of summing up a lot of her legacy and experience together, was this call to action for everybody in the state. And I think it resonates no matter where you are along the political spectrum. But he shared: plant a tree, adopt a dog, bake double batches, write a thank you note, knock some doors, get in good trouble, and always, always bring snacks for everyone. And I think leading with that sense of care and compassion for the people in this work, knowing that the work and the policy is a thing that we all have to debate and discuss and decide on, but that ultimately it's at the center of all of this are the people, and treating people as people first, and as policies as what we're debating is really the heart of this, and not just in a sort of civility for civility's sake way, but as a real way of how the work gets done as communities. When you treat people as equals, when you treat them as people who are deserving of respect and care, you're more willing to sit down and really listen and engage with them. And when you make a tough decision that they disagree with, they're more likely to respect it, to work with you, and to continue that relationship forward than if it's just talking points and just parties and just, who's sitting in what seat at any given moment. And I think that's something we can all carry forward as we try and work through and beyond this moment.
If there are folks within the queer community who are looking for resources right now, how do they connect with OutFront?
Yeah, outfront.org or at OutFrontMN on most social media. We just got out of legislative session here, and we'll be sharing some updates tomorrow on some of the things that we did accomplish as we continue to hold in our thoughts all those folks who are affected directly by this horrific violence. But yeah, we'll be out there and out throughout the state at Prides as we were this last weekend.
Thank you, Kat, for joining us here on the Gailey Show. Obviously not the circumstances that we would have loved to have talked with you about, given that it's Pride Month, but we really appreciate the leadership that you are giving to the state, not only just in this moment, but through OutFront Minnesota. And so we look forward to having you back on here under different circumstances. But for right now, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this special broadcast of the Gailey Show. Tomorrow, Representative Sandra Feist, DFL from District 39B, will be joining us to share her remembrances of Speaker Emerita Hortman. Up next on WCPT 820 is Choose Views with Richard Chu. On AM 950, it is the Matt McNeil Show, and stay tuned after that for Native Roots Radio. You can stream our show everywhere you get your podcast or at youtube.com/@thegailey show. Until tomorrow, folks, be well.